Well, I wake up about noon. No, I'm kidding. So, I mean, it's to to do what we do, every day kind of is different, which is fun. So I actually don't like to start that early, and I like to have my mornings to myself and my family. So I usually will book if I have a client in studio, I'll have that client, like, I don't like to start any earlier than 10. And, so if I have an in studio shoot for the day. Could be one shoot, could be two shoots, or I'll be on location somewhere. So I'll be in and around mainly Long Island and New York City, anywhere in New York. But the thing that I love about this, one of the many things, is that there isn't a typical day. Every day is different, which is cool. I'm meeting new people every day, new faces, new stories. And I like that because it keeps me from getting bored, you know?
How would you describe your style of headshot or portrait photography?
So the thing that is a little tricky that we kind of touched upon before we went live is that, there's these definitions for headshots versus portraits. And I always joke that the only people who care about the difference of those definitions are photographers. Like, my clients never, they don't care what I call it. They just like a great photo. But for me, just to keep things clear and to delineate things, I do consider headshots head and shoulders, typically simple, clean lighting, simple backdrop. Think like commercial style a la Peter Hurley. I think that's the best definition of a headshot. But then for me, portraiture is a whole nother way of telling the story. So I try and do both with my clients. So in a typical session, if I'm working with an actor, or even if I'm working with um, a business person, someone who's a CEO or any kind of entrepreneur or any kind of creative for that matter, I like to give them both of those kinds of images because I feel like that sometimes we limit what we can do with clients based on their job description. But again, at the end of the day, the people you work with, they only want great photos. And so I find that a lot of my business clients love the more artistic, for lack of a better word, portraits that I like to create. And those are the most fun to create for me. But I like to do it all, and I'll do it all in one session, in 2 hours or less. That's pretty much what I do.
So it's interesting to me, as a headshot and portrait photographer, to look at different styles of headshots, for example, and also I see, you know, I see sort of fashion movements coming up, and like you mentioned the typical Peter Hurley headshot, that very clean look, that very almost like flat lighting most of the time. Um, do you think is that still something that people want? Because I remember when Peter first sort of introduced that kind of style, it was really all the rage. Is that still something that's very popular nowadays? And if so, is it something that's predominantly requested by let's say corporate clients or actors?
Yeah, I think so. I think that style is the triangle light, for lack of a better term, has become sort of a ubiquitous light, of course, but also it's become very much a kind of standard fare corporate light. So I don't know that for corporate, yes. For actors, I think that it's always good to have at least one or two of those in their portfolio. But I like to mix it up. I want my clients to leave with a gallery that has stuff like that, but then all kinds of different sort of styles and looks and tones, because I feel like the more you give them variety, the better off you are. Plus, as it becomes harder and harder for us in this industry due to AI, and also due to the fact that there are so many people doing, say, triangle light and stuff like that, that it's a lot more common than it was. I feel like we as photographers have to work harder to develop our own style, our own look, and really delineate ourselves from the pack, as it were.
It's an interesting point because I remember, it's not really that long ago. It was only a few years ago when that Peter Hurley style, it really, exploded, and everybody wanted to emulate that and and copy that and do it because it seemed like such a different thing.
Yeah.
Um, and now it's almost like it's become such a standard, um, that I've always wondered whether it's better to like really drill down on that, or whether it's better to find your own personal voice, within that industry. When we're talking headshots in particular, portraiture
Right.
in general, that's a completely different thing, but
I
particularly in
think
the headshot
they're
market.
I think they're related, and I think that the skills you learn from learning like Peter's styles of lighting, some of and I studied with Peter too early on when I started my journey as a photographer. So I learned a lot of those skills from him that he teaches, and then kind of adapted them to my work. But I think that I look at it as having tools in a toolbox, because what I end up doing now a lot of time is I I just use light that makes sense for the face in front of me. And the more people that I photograph, the more I can see right away, okay, this kind of lighting is not going to work on this person. I'm going to do something else. So sometimes that is really the best way to approach it. But the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better off you are. And the variety is good also because someone like me, I do pretty much a la carte sales on my images. So the more variety I give them, like if I can give them 5 different stellar looks with different lighting and all of that, then this is going to just increase my bottom line too. So it's a win-win for me.
Do you predominantly work with actors or corporates, or a mix of both?
It's a mix of both. I would say it's probably 50-50. But as I grow my business, I am getting more of the individual sessions from actors and artists and creatives. So, but I'm a musician myself, and actually my background is all in music, and all of my formal training is in music. So all of my schooling is as a jazz musician, and so I'm really connected with that community too. So I work with a lot of musicians and a lot of artists, and that's what I love. That's why those are my favorite clients, because I love to create with other creatives. But I'll do a lot of on location corporate shoots too. So it's a pretty fair mix at this point, which is nice.
How do you plan your sessions? Do you do consultation, or do people show up? And how do you plan your lighting setups through, for example?
Yeah, so they book online, and if they book online, they can book without calling me or talking to me at all. So if that happens, then I do a consult call with them. I make sure I connect with them. If they call me, I try to do everything where I can speak to somebody, because I feel like that's obviously a better way to deal with clients that you're working one-on-one with, and people like that extra touch. So it kind of starts with a consult, find out what they need the headshots for. I like to learn about what industry are you in? What are your goal for these headshots? Like a big part of it is figuring out what the client wants to do. You might get someone who is getting an award, and they just need a photo where they're going to look great and use it for that. But most of my clients are going to be kind of moving up in the world, and they're either trying to go for a better job, or they're trying to move up in their own job, or they were just promoted in their job and now they're going to be doing a lot of speaking at conferences, or they just wrote a book and they're a corporate person. So being armed with that knowledge helps me to know what kind of looks they're going for when they come here, and I'm able to help guide them when it comes to how they should dress, what kind of lighting, what kind of backgrounds we should use, just the whole aesthetic of the images we create. So that's part of it. And then for an actor, and even for corporate clients, I tell my clients, bring your entire closet with you. Because the thing that people do is, if you tell them, oh, you want to bring a minimum of 3 options, they will bring 3 things and you're not going to like any of them. And that's usually what happens. So I tell them, bring your entire closet. And they're like, I have a lot of stuff. Do you really want me to bring a lot of stuff? Yes. And I tell them, if you bring a bunch of stuff and we only use 4 or 5 items, all you have to do is bring it home with you. It's better than if you don't bring it. We won't have that option, because people don't realize that sometimes you might look good in something in the flesh, but then when you take a picture in that same outfit, it just doesn't translate well, or vice versa. So when they get here with their closet, I welcome them in. I let them get settled. I offer them water, coffee. Do you need to use the restroom? I want them to ease into the session. I don't want to rush it if it's a full session, because people are already generally nervous enough, So they'll come in, then we take a look at some of the clothing, and then what I'll do is I will coordinate the clothes that they bring with the backdrops that I have. So one thing that I love to do is I love to make sure that the skin tone of the person, the hair color, the clothing, the back, all works in some way with the color backdrops that I have when I do my portraits. So if I do headshots, it's typically on a gray, like a medium gray, or sometimes a bright white, like the Hurley kind of thing. But when I do my portrait work, I have a number of different color backdrops, and I like to coordinate those tones. Like the blue right behind me is one of my favorite backdrops. And when you do that, the images take on a very different life, because it's not just, okay, let's just put you in front of this one backdrop that I have. And there's nothing wrong with that if you only have one backdrop. When I started, I only had one backdrop. It was expensive, and I bought a large gray backdrop. And I just put everyone in front of that because that's all I had. And it looked great with them. But the more I do this, the more I realize that coordinating, kind of being your own creative director and artistic director in your sessions makes a big difference in the final results and just the impact that the photos have.
I find that too. I've just recently started experimenting with, just changing up the backdrops a little bit. I've been using the same options for a while, for a good few years. And it is sometimes, I don't know, I just feel like I want to switch things up a little bit, maybe change the lighting, change the modifiers, just change the backdrops around a little bit. And by sheer chance, I did a corporate shoot the other day, and some of the images had to be on a white backdrop, and I've moved away from that super clean white, because it's like I always get the sort of sense that the images sort of look more pasted on, and so I like it when there's a little either a graduation in it, or when it's not 100% white, it's just slightly off, but. In this particular instance, I did the classic, creating a gray backdrop out of a white backdrop just by changing the distance. But for some reason, the tones I got in this particular shot were just absolute killer. And to be honest with you, the background is so clean and even that you'd never think that wasn't a gray backdrop. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, then press here for the full episode in glorious Technicolor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.